Welcome to Lead and Follow, a podcast that explores how great collaboration actually happens. I'm your host, Sharna Fabiano, author of the book Lead and Follow, The Dance of Inspired Teamwork. And I'm pleased to bring you the latest research, insights, and learning methods to help you work together better with the people around you. I help founders, solopreneurs, and new leaders become great at collaborating because I've seen how much more becomes possible when people integrate their ideas, perspectives, and strengths in a practical way. To learn more about coaching with me and for a one-time discount on your first session, go to sharnafabiano.com/coaching and enter the promo code podcast. The link is in the show notes. And now, here's the episode. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Carri Dominick, a physical therapist with a specialty in pelvic health. Carri and I met in a local group for small business owners almost 5 years ago when we both had moved to Long Beach around the same time. Carri treats a lot of athletes in her practice, and she's an athlete herself. And so I asked her today to chat with me about the dynamics of collaboration on her volleyball team and how the players lead and follow one another while they're actually playing a game. Carri, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Sharna. Thanks for having me. I can't believe we know each other for so long until I saw that written. Time flies.
I know. 5 years, right? Goes very quickly. Before we dive into volleyball, Carri, I want you just to give listeners a little sense of your background, where you're coming from so that they can appreciate your insights a little bit more.
Yeah. So I'm a physical therapist. I've been a physical therapist for like 15 years now. And we're not talking exactly about physical therapy today, but I've played sports like my whole life. And so I probably started playing volleyball like in middle school. And then after high school, I just play it like recreation league. So like for fun, but it's competitive. Since that's kind of going to be like our topic today.
Thank you for that. And for listeners who don't know, and actually for me too, could you just, even though this sounds really basic, kind of give us the formal structure of how a volleyball team works?
Yeah. So mostly I play indoor volleyball, pre-pandemic. So there's 6 people on a team and you all have a certain role on the team. Like some people are hitters, there's one setter. And it depends, like in the front row, you're a hitter. In the back row, you're like a defensive player. So roles are kind of fluid, but you have like a specific role on the team. And then, depending if you're front row or back row, like you go to a certain spot on the court and you play a certain role within the team and the game.
That makes a lot of sense. Just out of curiosity, is there a formal single leader in this team, or is each role kind of defined kind of in and of itself?
That's a good question. So I would say on a volleyball team, the setter is kind of like who you look to as a leader on the court, because basically in volleyball, you have 3 touches before the ball has to go over the net. So ideally, you want the setter to always get the second ball. So they're kind of the leader on the court, but it's a very fluid, as far as lead and follow, it's very fluid moment by moment. But if you had to pick a leader, that's probably the person, because then they're choosing like which hitter they're going to set it to. So they kind of have a lot of leadership roles like in the game.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense in terms of how I think of leadership, which is a little bit like setting things up, literally like setting, the setter, or making a decision about like, okay, how is this particular play going to go? But I love that you said it's very fluid. And of course, that's like my interest is exploring what those dynamics are beyond these sort of formal positions. So maybe you could just talk a little bit more about how you experience that fluidity, like among those 6 people.
In volleyball, I think of it as a lot of collaboration and communication, which is important to any probably like leader-follower pairing.
Totally.
We're taught a lot from an early age, like to talk to each other. So like to say the name of the person who it's going to, or say me if it's coming to me, so people know. So I don't know, I guess that falls into leadership at the moment, right? And then maybe the teammates are the followers if there's a definition to it. So they're telling you like it's in or it's out or it's short or it's long or it's hard or it's a tip. So a lot of communication between people. But then let's say like the ball comes to me and I'm trying to get it to the setter. So then I go from leader in that one moment, I guess, to follower, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the setter is going to set the hitters. And so often the other teammates are telling the hitter like, oh, you have a blocker, or try to hit to this spot. So it's very like moment by moment, who's the leader, who's the follower, but it's a lot of communication, which is probably, what we need in leadership and followership in other scenarios.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely. I love the example of just naming, where it is, because that's such a visceral, clear example of like essential communication, like where is the ball? That's what we need to know. And, sometimes in like a work environment, even that seems hard. Like, can we just name the thing that is happening? Right.
Yeah.
But I want to kind of highlight a little what you're saying about how the lead and follow switches as you name, okay, it's coming to me, but now I'm sending it to the setter. So then the setter is like, the leader, but then the hitter is maybe going to be the leader after that to kind of move the ball around, like literally, so to speak.
Yeah.
And the role of communication seems to me like a super supportive. Like it's something, of course, everyone needs to do. And it's almost maybe hard to say like, okay, who's leader and a follower as you're all like naming these things. But it seems like that is an essential like role of support in order to elevate like whoever is going to be the leader, whoever is going to be managing the ball in any given moment. I mean, how do you respond to that? Am I kind of reading your description well?
Yeah, I think that's a perfect interpretation. The leader, so to speak, is the person that's going to contact the ball, right? But like the people around them, giving them cues or hints, right, is like super important and helpful in the game. I think another example is like when it's the hitter's turn, the people who are like not hitting are trying to tell them like where to hit, where the other players aren't. So, because they're focusing on the ball at the moment. So it's very collaborative, very, very supportive. And I think, those supportive roles, those follower per se roles are like super important to elevate the game, like you said, because without that, like, yes, you can play the game, but it's much more responsibility on you. And it's helpful to have help from your teammates to give you hints and like help the game go smoother.
Yeah, I think that's a great, just like a little lesson, to almost carry into other environments, whether they're work or family or really anywhere is, we sometimes, I think, stereotypically think, oh, the leader or the one with the ball or the one with the decision, they're just like on their own, it's their job to do the thing and everyone else is just quiet or passive or steps back. And maybe that's, appropriate sometimes, but I appreciate how you said from an early age, you were taught to communicate, right? And to do this sort of supportive action to make sure the person with the ball knows, okay, here's where you want to put it. Here's what's coming. Like you have all the information you need to kind of, take the best shot or make the next best move. And although perhaps that, maybe this is another question for you. Like, is that ever too much? Like, does that ever get overwhelming?
A couple of things. I think the more you play with people, the better you get at communication, right? Which we can probably translate that to any teamwork, right? Office, family, whatever, relationships. So I think that's normal. It's like, as you play together more, you get better. And that's why sports teams practice a lot. So they have all those basics down. So when it comes to competition, you know each other. And so like when I played with the same people for a long time, we kind of knew like who's a little more aggressive, like who's better at this particular spot. But your other question, so sometimes it can be too much communication, right? If you're both looking at the ball but not looking at each other, this happens. Sometimes teammates will collide. But, in the sports world, we always think like that's better than neither person going for the ball and the ball dropping. I mean, that will happen on occasion. Just everyone's in the moment and it's loud, or the gym is loud, or you're just like so focused that you kind of tune out other people, which I'm sure there's a lot of parallels to other situations with that. But as far as sports go, people are happier about that. Like your teammates will be happier if you mess up because you're both going for it versus like looking at each other and nobody like literally letting the ball drop. So there's probably some translations to other parts of life.
Yeah, no, I did want to ask about like how you get good at this kind of supportive communication or naming things or calling out, positions or locations? Is there a way you get good at it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it is like anything else. It's practice, right? Mm-hmm. Like we're not just born. We don't just go to a job being good communicators, but you're coached this way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember like first starting out to play volleyball, and it was like, you start with the basics, like you say me if I'm going to get it right. Mm-hmm. And you're also taught like, don't say you, but try to say someone's name.
Right.
It's more specific. So kind of start with the basics. And then as you get more advanced, you learn to say more things like, is the ball in? Is the ball out? Is it, where is it on the court? So it's like any other skill, like over time you build more and better communication. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I think a part of it is, again, like any other sort of relationship or teamwork, getting to know your teammates and how they respond. Because there are some people that like respond better to like more, louder, bigger, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's some people that don't respond well to that. They get intimidated. So I think that's sort of like fine tuning it as you get better at the skill, and then learning more about the people around you and how they respond to it.
Some of these things sound really obvious, but I still find they're so important to remember. Collaborating in a sports environment or somewhere else is you have to customize it to the people that you're with, right? You have to get to know them, at least a little bit, to the extent that you can, and that will change how you talk to them, right? And there's no like magic formula, so to speak, other than like get to know the people you're working with, yeah. And be open to maybe a variety of volumes or timings or whatnot. And I know I can definitely imagine taking that into a professional environment or even like a client relationship where your first job is to get to know the person you're working with and figure out what kind of language works for them.
I think about these things too. As I'm saying them, I think about, like working with clients, like it's individualized how I communicate to them, and then working with my team and my staff. And like, I was thinking about that with the, like letting the ball drop versus overlap, it's like sometimes with my team, my staff team, I'd rather we overlap and like two people are working on the same project versus no one working on it, So
right.
Yeah. These are basic concepts, but I'm like, oh yeah, they translate to exactly like my work too.
Yeah. And I think that's sometimes not counterintuitive at work, and, not to kind of get too far from the volleyball court here, but I think, you are someone who you can make those connections very easily. So I'd love to hear, even more about how you think about that. Like at work, what I was saying is, what I hear a lot anyway from my coach clients is that there's sometimes in an office environment, a kind of culture where you're like, I'm just doing my stuff and I'm not like looking beyond, my own small little sphere. And I think sometimes there the ball can drop, right? Because everyone else thinks someone else is doing it and then nothing happens. And so that's probably in most environments less desirable than both people trying to do something and maybe there being some misunderstanding. I don't know. Do you have any other thoughts on that, how it translates into work?
Yeah. I mean, a couple of things. I think with my staff and my team, sometimes I would get annoyed at first, like, why are you guys both working on this? But then I'm like, oh, there's two different perspectives. Like there's probably a better outcome. Yeah. And then when I work with clients, I always feel like I over communicate, like, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is what I'm finding. This is your homework. And like, have them repeat it back to me. And sometimes I feel like it's like over communicating, but then I've realized like my clients will leave and be like, they can repeat back to me like the main points. And I'm like, perfect. That's what I want. They like understood, we communicated well. So yeah, I guess what I feel like in the volleyball team and in work is like over communication is better than under. And that probably is true for most situations.
So Carri, you've just thrown out a ton of really interesting things, I think, about how volleyball team members communicate and collaborate together. I wonder if you have any examples of plays or moments that are coming to mind that illustrate this sort of leader-follower exchange or fluidity, maybe like more clearly in your mind.
One of the things I really picture is like, when the other team's hitting the ball at you and you're like trying to be there to like play the ball, right? And then I feel like it's so helpful when your teammates are like telling you like it's in or it's out, right? Because sometimes you don't know where the lines of the court are, but you're looking at the ball, right? So they're kind of looking at the surroundings and they're helping you with that. So I feel like that's a good example of like where like the leader follower and the communication and collaboration like is super helpful. Like, you know, you have one focus and then they're kind of checking out the surroundings and helping support you.
Yeah, that sounds so valuable. I'm just imagining if I were, you know, working on a team project, like say we're trying to, I don't know, develop a website, right? And I'm like in charge and my teammates are like, oh, by the way, you know, here's a parameter you need to be aware of. You need to make sure you include this, you know, and we can't do that. And I'm like, oh, okay. So now I have all this information that my team supplied to me. Now I can execute the thing and it'll be more successful. That just makes so much sense to me. And, you know, next week it's somebody else could be leading a different project. And then, you know, I could be the one, you know, providing those parameters or those, you know, kind of safety notes for the other person. I love that. And I think it's super translatable. Any other thoughts coming up? Things that for you are like really key and, you know, how you work together?
Yeah, I think the other like big example I think of on the volleyball court is like when someone's going to hit the ball, then the other teammates are like surrounding them in case they get blocked to like hopefully pick up the defense, but also at the same time telling them like how to hit around the block or where to hit in an open court. So again, just that like supportive communication, collaboration. And I like the word that you used in your example of like being more successful, right? Like that's the goal on the volleyball court. And then obviously that's the goal at like work or life or whatever else. It's like, so that collaboration, that communication is just helping everyone to be more successful.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I'm just going to show my ignorance here of volleyball and team sports in general. But, you know, when I thought of having this conversation, I thought we would talk about roles, right? Like you'd said at the beginning, there's some setters, there's the hitters, you know, I'm like, okay, that I understand. And they probably maybe switch leading and following a little, but this piece that you keep emphasizing here about the communication, the support and the verbalizing of key points of data, that I had no idea that was happening. And it just, you know, I'm delighted by it because it strengthens, you know, my conviction that because that's a followership role, right? That's very much like a followership skill, that sort of informing, supporting, like adding details, having the other person's back, like guarding them, showing them, you know, giving them a little bit more information about where to go. That in my mind anyway, is very much like a supportive follower sort of action. And that seems so key, like so important to the success of a team. And I don't think you see that from the outside necessarily if you're watching a volleyball game, right? You just see like the movement.
Yeah.
You don't hear necessarily like all these subtleties, no, or even if you do, you might not, or I'll speak for myself. I might not understand, you know, like what they're saying, but I really appreciate how you've highlighted that and kind of proved to us how, again, this invisible like follower support role is so important, foundational.
Yeah, I think that is, again, going back to what you said earlier, that's like the key to success is everyone supporting whoever has the ball. There's like one other thing that came to mind when you were saying that, and you'll see this like in all kind of team sports, like football, basketball, volleyball, depending on what's happening on the other side of the court or like at different moments in the game, like people know where to go. So you have a certain place on the court that you go. And I think that's another key piece to this like collaboration, leadership, followership is like you're trusting your teammates to be in their spot so that you can cover your area, right? And like,
right, that makes sense.
And you're trusting them to be in their spot. And so when that goes wrong, you'll see like people getting mad at each other. Why weren't you covering your spot? You went to the wrong spot. But when it goes really well, it almost to me feels like a dance. Like people just like move to where they go and they move back to where they go on the next play. And it's very like fluid and it like, it's just very smooth when it works well. But when it doesn't work well, then you'll see like teammates getting mad at each other. So yeah, again, back to just like followership is so important. Like you're trusting your teammates to be where they're supposed to be so that you can play your spot, right? So
yeah, that makes sense. It's like in any team, again, work, home, wherever, community, like you take responsibility for a certain area, right? Whether that's a physical space or like a part of work or something. And then your teammates, I trust you to do that. And so that, again, under glorified perhaps piece of just taking that responsibility for your area is a foundational, right? And when it, as you just said, right, if that doesn't happen, it's like you've removed a brick, from the house and things just start falling apart. I wonder if there are any other examples of things going wrong, like not to dwell on the going wrong, but just to maybe illustrate like why this is so important.
So I played a lot of co-ed volleyball in my adult years, and the males are definitely like usually more dominant, right? But there's still like this fluidity to where you are in the court and how you play. And I remember these one male, one female on our team. So also in volleyball, you're always next to the same people. So you like rotate. And so like the whole game, you're by the same people. And so the girl is a good player. She was like a collegiate athlete, but she was intimidated by this like really dominant male. And to the point, like she didn't want to play anymore after the season was over once. So I think of that as like a time when communication goes wrong. He was over communicating and like over dominant, or like maybe too much leadership, right? If we're using those terms. And maybe she was too passive, but they just like didn't work well next to each other. So maybe, as teammates, maybe we should have changed the lineup so they weren't next to each other or something. So there's a couple of places where that broke down and didn't work well.
In what ways did that impact like the performance of the team?
He was a good player and he was really dominant. So the team as a whole did well, but sort of off the court, like she would complain and she would be annoyed. And then, at the end of the season, like she didn't want to play anymore. So kind of in the big picture, it didn't work. So like in the short term, like each game, it was fine from the outside appearance, right? It seemed fine. But in the bigger picture, it was a big problem. So
it just reminds me of the sustainability question, which is up a lot right now in terms of companies in every industry. I think, there's been previously this bias towards short-term gain, which sometimes compromises relationships, and so now we're seeing a lot of people leaving their jobs, right? And not coming back, or, dissatisfaction. And I think that speaks a little bit to the long-term, right? So your example is, okay, maybe in the short term, it seemed okay. The team did, quote unquote, well, meaning they won, but they lost a player or they risked losing a player, which is like in the long term pretty bad. And that's, I think, similar to what we're seeing now when people are starting to think more about long-term sustainability and what do I really want for my job? Like the relationships matter a lot more. It's not just about the money or just about winning the next contract.
Exactly. I think that's, a perfect example. And so, maybe as the team leader, like we should have changed the rotation to make it, make it sustainable for everyone, right? Maybe the bigger picture of the team failed at that part. Like, so kind of going back to the work example, it's like if two coworkers are colliding or clashing, it's like maybe we can switch their roles so everyone's successful and feels like they contribute, right? I think that's really kind of what it came down to, is she felt like she wasn't contributing or she wasn't getting enough like time being the leader, touching the ball, right? She just always felt like overshadowed by this other player.
We've talked about this a little bit already, Carri, but is there anything else that you've taken from your experience with team sports into your business or into your client work that you want to share with listeners?
Only in this past year have I had staff and like a business team. So that's like been a new role for me to learn how to be the leader in that. I think of it in the same ways as the volleyball team or like how I work with my clients. It's like I try to over communicate to them, and then also always like asking for feedback because they have different skills than me and different tasks. I guess to me, like the whole point of this conversation, which I didn't expect it to go this way either, but a lot of communication and collaboration. And I feel like that just kind of keeps people open to sort of preventing breakdown in the relationship.
You can pass on this question if you want, but since it's come up so much and it's been this sort of thread, through the conversation, there are a lot of ways to communicate, right? And they're not all effective. So I wonder, when you think of taking that so seriously and making it a priority in your sports life and in your business, what do you mean by communication or over communicating? What are you expressing that you really want to prioritize?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is verbal, right? So like how we talked about like on the volleyball court, it's like talking to each other, telling them things that they might not see because they're focused on one thing. So with clients, yeah, sometimes it's learning. It's again, back to the same thing as volleyball. Like what words do I use that this person understands, right? And in physical therapy, it's a lot of demonstration, which sometimes I'm like, oh, I can show you better than I can explain. But I also try to explain to clients like what I'm seeing is the problem based on like what I'm testing, what I'm seeing from them, and then trying to like verbalize that back to them so they understand. Yeah. And then with my team, same thing. It's like we have sort of a email or like a shared document of tasks. But then there's like verbal communication, like, what does this mean? Or like feedback, like, is this what you were asking for? So I think a lot of it's verbal. To me, I guess I think of, obviously with clients, a lot of it is visual. I'm getting feedback from them. Like, are you doing the exercise right? What is the breakdown in the exercise that's causing pain or in movement, right? But I think a lot of it comes back to being able to verbalize to them or to my team at work or my teammates in volleyball, like what's happening, like what we're seeing.
I think speaking is our main way of communicating in most realms, at least the way that we've set up our society. But it's worth being mindful about that. And like, what are we using our words for, right? Are they to like name a location or to clarify a task or request rather than just like talking, for the sake of talking?
Yeah.
Because I think it does matter, right? It does matter. And there's a common experience, I think, in like meetings, right? Where we just sort of talk in circles and like nothing happens. But what are we really trying to communicate? And I think you've given a good examples here with even the volleyball is like, name the person, right? Like, where are you going? That those journalistic essentials, like who, what, where, when, and being responsible, like with our language. I think also when we're working in a professional team, like what are we doing together? When does it need to happen? Things like that really make a difference and help us, feel comfortable and be successful as well. So we weren't planning on talking about that, but I think it's a really great reminder, as we start the year. This is the first episode of the 2022 year. So thank you for highlighting that. And Carri, I want you to, give you some time here to share anything else you'd like about your physical therapy practice. I know you not only work locally in person with people, but you have various online offerings. So how can people find out more about that?
Yeah, my business is called Recharge Therapy, and that's our website, Recharge Therapy. So yeah, majority of my work is in person, but I do offer virtual consults. And so my specialty is pelvic health, which is like helping people with pelvic pain, painful sex, bladder issues, the things we don't talk about in life. And so I always tell people like virtual consults, we're not looking at anything, we're just talking. But if I'm treating someone for like, a knee injury or back injury, like, yes, sometimes we'll do virtual consults like with video to look at movement. Yeah. And then I tried to create a lot of online programs, a lot of them aimed at moms. That's like a huge portion of my population, and getting them back to fitness, getting them prepared for birth, getting them recovered after birth. I think that's a lot of my clients is like, I had a baby, my body went through all these changes. Like I want to go back to fitness, right? So it might not be team sports, but it might be some sort of fitness. Yeah. So I have some like online programs, and then hopefully soon we might have a virtual option of a functional movement class series.
Well, thank you so much. And I will put all of Carri's information in the show notes, rechargetherapy.com. She has some wonderful online courses there. I encourage you check them out. Carri, thank you again for sharing your insights from the volleyball court. I think there are fabulous metaphors there for all of us. So thank you once again. And I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you for having me.
You have been listening to the Lead and Follow podcast. Special thanks to Glover Gill for composing our music. And a huge thank you to all of you who support the show. It really means a lot. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or consider joining the Lead and Follow fan club for as little as $3 a month. There's a link at the bottom of the show notes.